Arsenal drew against Everton while Liverpool were down to 10 men and City lost to United. The timeline was going off. It was over. Arteta out. It was happening again. Christmas period coming up. Palace away, Ipswich at home, Brentford away. If Arsenal drop any points during this festive period, do you think they're going to be out of the title race?
I think they've got very little margin for error. I think that's fair to say, but it's difficult to say that if they drop 2 points, for instance, in one of these games, that they'll be out of it because we're relying on other games as well. You know, they play into this equation, so it's difficult to say. But I think it's clear that Arsenal need to be better. They need to improve. Generally, in the league this season, they've not been as good as maybe people expected at the start of their campaign. I think there are reasons for that, not excuses, but I think there are reasons for that. I think you look at their fixtures, very, very difficult start to the season in comparison to some of the teams they're competing with. So you hope that over the course of their campaign, that'll even itself out, and Arsenal will be in a position that maybe reflects where they are in comparison to your Liverpools and Manchester Cities and Chelsea's a little bit better. But there isn't margin for error. That's the truth of it. You know, they've left themselves in a position where, you know, they're behind, they're chasing. Maybe that suits Arsenal this season. I don't know. But the open play stuff and struggling from open play has been a narrative that's kind of come up over the last couple of months. And to be fair, you can understand why. Like, I don't think it's as big a problem as some people would have you believe, but Arsenal are definitely struggling in that department.
I think we discussed this on the last episode. You were saying like this is potentially a set piece side. You were saying it's not. You're just playing to a potential strength that Arteta's found. Then Thierry Henry went on M&F and said what I've been saying. Some of us are right, some of us just say things. But he felt like Arsenal are grabbing the games that they're going after. Obviously, the Fulham game where Raul Jimenez scores from, I think Fulham had an open play XG of like 0.07 or something like that. It was really low. And then Everton barely had a chance, but Arsenal still couldn't get over the line. Odegaard gets hooked in that game. Do you think Arsenal, like, if you're not Saka, do you think they just need more from other players to turn this around?
Yeah, a little bit. And I also think there might be a little bit of a psychological issue at play. I mean, we kind of talked about it last year and the year before as well, about maybe Arteta and Arsenal side not being particularly psychologically strong, particularly towards the end of the season, which is why they came up short when they were probably favourites with like a few months to go. And I do feel like a little bit of that is taking place now, particularly with the Fulham and Everton game. There doesn't seem to be like a huge amount of confidence within the side. I know the open play thing has been an issue, and of course it's been an issue when Martin Odegaard's been out. But like the players that they have on the pitch should all be performing a little bit better. And I do feel like they go into games, and I don't know whether it's because they've become slightly over reliant on set pieces, which I'm a bit bored of the talk because a set piece is still a goal. It doesn't really matter. It's part of the game. And they've got an incredible technician there who's created set pieces, which are the most lethal I've ever seen in my life. But I do worry. I do
Hey,
wonder.
you didn't see Sam Allardyce.
I do. No, but come on, the amount of goals that they're scoring from them is ridiculous. And I do wonder if potentially there's a little bit of an over reliance on it. They don't seem to be going for games in the way that I would expect a title challenger to be doing.
I said this on a podcast the other day. Like, for me, there's a desire at Arsenal, and it's obviously driven by Mikel Arteta, for control and dominance. They're two words that he repeatedly uses. And after the Everton game, that's what he was talking about again. We controlled the game, we dominated the game, we could have won the game 3-4 times over. But I think in our pursuit of trying to be dominant and control every aspect of the game, we've almost coached out some of the spontaneity of some of these players. So Martinelli's a great example. I didn't agree with Thierry Henry, by the way, sort of making it out as if he was the issue. He's a part of the wider problem, but Martinelli's game has changed as a result of the team that he's playing in and the instructions that he's been given. If you want control, you want dominance, you want possession, then you can't have Martinelli trying to beat 2-3 men every time he gets the ball. So when Thierry Henry's saying, well, he should have taken this guy on or he should have taken that guy on, if the remit is to keep the ball first and foremost, he can't keep taking those gambles.
Yeah.
So that's where I feel like the overriding instructions have clouded some of the minds of some of our players with regards to what they do in certain scenarios. It's become a bit robotic.
And it's a little bit of the sort of Jack Grealish conundrum, isn't it? People like lament over what Jack Grealish was at Aston Villa, but Pep Guardiola's the same. Obviously, Arteta's taken a lot of that blueprint, which is to control games. And I think the reason that City aren't doing well, which is kind of the same reason that Arsenal are struggling a little bit, is that there aren't enough killers on the pitch. So if Odegaard isn't a 10 out of 10 and playing incredibly incisive passes, it's going to be quite difficult to win games. If Havertz hasn't got his shooting boots on, you're not going to win games. And then you're kind of over-reliant on Saka, who really is kind of the only shining star in that team at the moment, who's regularly performing to the levels that we know he can. And if you don't have those killers and your main objective is just to control the ball, you get games like the Everton game or the Fulham game where you have like 60-70% of possession, but you look back at the highlights, not much happened.
I think that's where I completely agree that Arteta's tried to. He basically tries to control the odds, and he wants the odds to be 2-1 to Arsenal and 1-10 for the opposition, rather than 2-1 to Arsenal and 8-1 for the opposition. I think that then leads to this situation where they're jostling with, shall we go for it? Should we not? And a lot of Arsenal fans were saying after the Everton game, there's just no urgency. And I felt like I'm not an Arsenal fan, but I sat there watching it. I was going, just move the ball quicker. But I think every time they moved it, McNeil tried to step in. They were just popping it back and go, hey, like you're not going to get near it. That then leads me to go, well, what's going on with Sterling? What's going on with Gabriel Jesus, who's very good against Crystal Palace? What's going on with Trossard? Like, you still have attacking players, but suddenly none of them are up to their level.
Yeah, I feel like Mikel Arteta has been a bit unlucky in that a load of them seem to have lost their way all at the same time. I guess you could then route that back to the manager and say, is it something that's coming from him that's causing that? But for example, Leandro Trossard and Martinelli seem to be in this cycle. You know, Martinelli starts a game, doesn't really do much in the final third. So the next game, he might start Leandro Trossard. He comes in and has the same type of performance, and then it's back to Martinelli. So I don't think Mikel Arteta is set on which one of those is going to play. The lack of continuity down the left-hand side in general, I think, is a problem. Raheem Sterling, I don't think, has been given anywhere near as many opportunities as he deserves. I've seen instances this season where Arsenal have been chasing a goal and Arteta's prioritised changing his fullback, for instance, rather than bringing Sterling on. So that's been frustrating. And hopefully for Gabriel Jesus, he's turned a little bit of a corner, because last night, at the time of recording against Crystal Palace, he was outstanding. It looked like the Gabriel Jesus that Arsenal signed. And I'm not even talking just about the goals, right? The finishes were great. They looked like finishes of someone who'd scored his 26th, 27th and 28th goal of the season rather than his second. The confidence was great. But it was his overall game I was really impressed with. He was dropping deep. He was running in behind. He was pulling left, pulling right, being really, really busy, which is what I like to see from him. And I actually spoke to him after the game last night. And I said to him, you know, your finishing is there. Everything was there tonight. But what struck me was that physically you looked back at it again. Do you feel at your best? And he said, this is the first time in ages that I've played and I haven't cramped. So
wow.
he's feeling really good physically, and I think that's going to make a bit of a difference.
I think there is something on the Gabriel Jesus point that, like you were just saying about killers. I think if you don't have killers, you need guys who can create actions.
Yeah.
And I think when I look at like Martinelli at the moment, he's obviously low on confidence, so he's not taking his man on. Trossard has never been someone who takes his man on. He's just a wonderful technician. So then you do look to like maybe a Sterling, but even at this age, Sterling towards the end at City wasn't taking players on. Then you go Gabriel Jesus, like he was at City. He always causes problems. Yes, he lacks the finishing touch, but I think if you can't, like you can't just go and find a killer now in this squad and say, can you turn it on tomorrow? Maybe it is a case of let's take a few more gambles, start players who are a bit more wild cardy and try and win games that way.
The problem is I don't think any of those people are the solution. I don't think Sterling, Jesus or Trossard are the solution at all. I think Gabriel Jesus had a fantastic game last night, and we know he's got good quality, but he's an incredibly inconsistent striker. I don't think any City fan lamented when he went. Sterling, we know all about Sterling. He's a pretty dreadful finisher. He should have scored last night. You know, hit it straight at the goalkeeper and then miss an open net, hit the crossbar. And that is Raheem Sterling. So he will create problems, but you can't rely on him to win the league. You just can't. You couldn't at the time, and you still can't now. And I don't think Trossard or Martinelli are those killers either. So I think if Saka and Odegaard aren't playing particularly well, there's not really anyone in that squad. We talked about it last week when we related it to Mo Salah about like a scruff of your neck player. Like Sergio Aguero was the one for City. He just took every single game by the scruff of his neck, big game, score goals. Didier Drogba. I don't feel like Arsenal have any of them now. Unless it's Saka, I just don't feel like you have any. So I feel like it's going to be really difficult in those very tight games, like your Evertons, like your Fulhams, whether they might implement a low block. You need certain players to pick out key passes or just shoot from range with accuracy. I don't think anyone on that left-hand side can.
I think it comes back to the point Nubaid was making there about odds. Like Mikel Arteta looks at it and says, well, if I've got Jesus, if I've got Sterling, if I've got Trossard, if I've got Martinelli, if I've got Saka, if I've got Odegaard, and I'm not reliant on that one man to deliver me goals, then that is a more effective way over the long term. You can include Kai Havertz in that as well. And look, Arsenal scored more goals last season than they had in Premier League history. And the season before, they'd broken the record then as well. So I get frustrated when people talk about a lack of goals. I think the problem is with Arsenal is that you can't pinpoint who exactly is the one responsible, like you can with City, where you go, it's Erling Haaland, or you look at Chelsea and you go, well, it's Cole Palmer at the minute. With Arsenal, you can't pinpoint who that responsibility falls on, and that leads to people then saying, well, none of them are at the level. But the point is, as a collective, are they at that level? At the minute, they're not really showing it, but I'm confident that over the course of the season, you'll see Arsenal back up there again.